So let's see that big picture, or at least parts of it, because MongoDB requires this extra database server setup, which we'll tackle in a separate module. But let's see this part at least, the React and Node Express API communication part, in action in a simple application. And no worries, this is just a short demo application. We'll build one, a way bigger one, the course project, from the ground up throughout the rest of this course. Attached, you find a zip folder, which you can unzip, and in there you'll find a frontend and a backend folder. Now, combined, this makes up your MERN application, and this is a very simple dummy application which I prepared for you. The frontend holds a React application. The frontend folder here was created, or this project here was created with Create React App, which is a tool by the React team to create React projects. And it holds a React application with some components, because React is all about components, as you will also learn again in the React refresher in a separate module. For now, you can just take it for granted. So we'll have the different components, the building blocks of our front-end user interface, so to say. And with the backend folder with exactly one core file, server.js. Now, to run these ends here, you need to install Node.js. You can install it from nodejs.org, and there simply download the latest version, 13 in my case, but that of course will change over time. Does not really affect the way Node works or looks like, however. And simply download that latest version and walk through the installer you get there. The default settings are fine, and this will install Node.js, so this special JavaScript runtime, onto your machine. It will also install one other tool onto your machine, and that's NPM, the Node Package Manager. This is a tool which is required anyways to install the various dependencies, so third-party libraries we use, in both our backend code as well as our frontend code. Because even though the frontend code is not run by Node.js, it still will use third-party libraries, which are then simply used by the browser, or, also an important part, by our build setup, our development setup, where we have a dummy server that serves our front end, which reloads the page whenever we change something, which optimizes our code, and so on. These are all steps which are not run once we deploy our finished front end, but which help us during development, and for that we also need third-party libraries, and actually also the Node runtime, which runs this entire front-end build process. So we definitely need Node.js to do anything here. Now, you also see I opened this project here in an IDE, in an integrated development environment. This is Visual Studio Code, a great free-to-use IDE you can find if you Google for VS Code, in which you can then install from the page you get to, code.visualstudio.com. It's free and available for all operating systems, so simply download it and walk through the installer if you want to use that same IDE here as I do. Now, in that IDE here, I also installed some so-called extensions. You can get to the extensions menu with View Extensions, and there specifically the extensions I recommend that you install are the Material Icon theme to make sure your file icons look like mine if you like that look. Path IntelliSense, which can help you with auto-completion of file names. Prettier, which helps you with auto-formatting your code so that it is easy to read and you don't have to format it manually. And with all that installed, also if you go back to the Explorer or use the shortcut you see here, I also recommend that you look into the themes you got configured. Under Code, Preferences, Color Theme, there you can switch it to a different theme. I'm using the Dark Plus default dark theme here, which gives me the look you see here. You also here see the file icons I got from the Material Icon theme. Last but not least, I already talked about Prettier and that auto formatting. You can always check out your keyboard shortcuts, and there specifically the Format Document shortcut is one you should bind, because that will help you use that Prettier extension to automatically reformat your code. But with that, that's basically the setup I have here. Then I opened that extracted folder, which holds the backend and frontend folder, and I'm now ready to go. Well, or almost. First of all, as I mentioned, every end has some packages, some dependencies it uses. You find those in the package.json file, which is your project management file, you could say. And you see that I treat backend and frontend as separated projects because they are logically separated. Now you see here for the backend in the package.json file, I got free dependencies, free third-party libraries this project uses. For the frontend, for the React application, I got these free dependencies. React, the library we use, React DOM, which is also part of React, and React scripts, which in the end helps us with our build setup and with this dummy server that serves the React application and so on. Now, to install these dependencies, you need to open up your terminal or command prompt, and you can use the one integrated into your IDE. You can go to terminal, new terminal here to open it, and then navigate frontend folder, and in there run npm install. And this uses the npm tool which was installed together with Node.js to install all the dependencies which are mentioned in the package.json file. It will then create such a node modules folder where these dependencies and their dependencies are actually stored in. Now, doing this just for the frontend alone is not enough, so I will open a second terminal and also navigate into the backend folder, because there I also want to install all the dependencies so that for both the frontend and the backend we got that installed. So let's wait for this installation process to finish, and thereafter let's start our two servers and see how they communicate with each other. So the installation of all the dependencies in both the frontend and backend folder finished, and now let's simply see what we got there before we have a look at the code. Now keep in mind, we have two logically separated ends here, and here, during development at least, we will also have two separated servers. Now, of course, both runs on our machine here, on our computer. But actually, we will run these two different ends under two different domains. Now, let's see what we got here. In the frontend folder, you can run npm start to start a development server that's part of the setup, basically added by this React scripts dependency, which will host your React application, this React single page application. So it's a development server which in the end hosts this single index.html file, which you find in the public folder there, which then in turn will import all the scripts it needs and launch your React app. You find that application, it should open up automatically actually, under localhost :3000. Localhost might look strange, but this is your domain. It's available on your local machine. It's a special domain there. And :3000 is the port on which we're visiting this. And combined, this actually is a domain as it would be the case for yourpage.com. So this combined is the actual domain. And if you would visit another page on, let's say, localhost 5000, that might look very similar, but it would actually be a totally different domain, as if it were served by a totally different machine. So here React automatically runs on localhost 3000, and that's our React single page application. Now let's go to the backend folder, and there you can also run npm start. Now here nothing opens up automatically, but you will see that you're now in a process which doesn't stop. So you can't enter a new command. By the way, it's the same for the frontend. That is the default, and it is what should be the case, because that means you have a running server. You can always stop these processes by hitting Ctrl-C on your keyboard, but then of course the server will be down. So as long as you're developing, you should have it up and running. So we got these two running servers, and the Node backend server here actually will run under localhost 5000. However, if you enter that, you will not see anything because this specific endpoint /nothing is not supported. Remember when I said that you as a developer decide which endpoints you want to support and you want to execute code on? Well, that's not one of them. Things change if you enter /products there, however. You see now you get back in the end a JavaScript object. This is actually this JSON notation I was talking about, which holds a products key and then an empty array. So here we seem to get back some data, even though it's empty, and that already looks quite promising. And now really keep in mind, localhost 5000 is a totally different server than localhost 3000. Now, obviously here we have some communication problems. With your Node server up and running, however, reload the React app on localhost 3000, and you will see that the loading part goes away, and instead we see could not find any products. Now let's add a book here for, let's say, $12.99 and click Add Product. And what you see is it now appears down there. Now that's nice. But what you will also see, if you reload now and you keep both servers up and running in between, you still get that. You see loading for a fraction of a second, and then you see a book here. So it looks like the book we created here really was stored somewhere, was stored on our backend server. And when we reload the React app, we're fetching data from that server. And since the server runs on its own domain, but technically, of course, on the same machine as our frontend, that request is super, super fast, which is why we see that loading text only for the fraction of a second, if we see it at all. But the really important thing here is that we are storing data on our backend, so on the Node Express app or with help of the Node Express app, and we're fetching it from there. Now that's how it works. Let's now have a look at the code to get a rough understanding of what's working together there.